everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Extra Shift. I'm Chris here as always with Brendon. How are we doing?
Pretty good. Yeah, it's I'm officially on holiday now, which is real nice. Work my last day for like a month yesterday, so it's really nice. But then, of course, I'm now like in full preparation for going away mode, which means I'm running around like way more busy than before, having to try and get everything done.
This is why we suddenly have a Friday night podcast going on, because I'm like, I need to know you're down before you go away.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of things I'm trying in the works, which will possibly, there might be a special guest pop in. I'm working on something there, so that could be.
I'm not sure what my availability is going to be. Usually, I can squeeze in a podcast while I'm on holiday. But
we did the Jumbo one from, was it Iceland?
Yeah, we did the first Carlson trade.
The Carlson trade,
from Iceland.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm traveling this time with my in-laws, so I'm not sure how easily I'll be able to
get them on.
Yeah,
get them on the pod.
We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm going to Japan for 3 weeks, so I'm looking forward to that. But it is.
I want to find out their take. I want to find out their take on the Ottawa Senators. So
yeah, I'm not convinced that they are aware that the Ottawa Senators exist, but it is episode 198.
So of course
we're closing in on 200.
So of course 98, and 98 of course can only mean one hot firing prospect, Jesse Puljujarvi. And right. Look, I will forever maintain taking him away from McDavid's wing when they did is what ruined him.
Look,
he was scoring fine.
Puljujarvi might not have ever been like the player that people wanted him to be, but like the expectation and the getting screwed around, I think just totally destroyed his development. I'm really interested to see though if he ends up making a comeback though, because he is. I saw recently he's like recovered from his like double hip surgery, and he obviously doesn't have an NHL contract at the moment, but he's been like training overseas. I'm real curious to see if he makes like a comeback or something next year and ends up on like a team in a better situation that doesn't have quite the same expectations of him, and he actually ends up being decent.
For me, I think Jesse Puljujarvi for me is a symptom of Edmonton in terms of he was doing fine. And their response was, we can do better than this. And they haven't. At no point have they consistently done better than this.
I mean, with the exception of like Bouchard, like who have they really like drafted and developed? Even then, they traded for Bouchard, didn't they? Did they draft Bouchard?
I thought they traded for him. But for me, the other thing that you got to think about too is like today, and we will talk about them. Oh yes, we will talk about them. But the Edmonton Oilers owe the San Jose Sharks like everything right now.
Yeah, because they did draft Bouchard, so there you go. Well done. The one prospect that's worked out for you in the last 5 years.
The only reason that people aren't talking about Edmonton today and the fact that they're still terrible is the San Jose Sharks. It's the only reason. Because, and yes, they go, Sam Gagner came back to the team and then he scored 2 goals because that's what you needed, Sam Gagner, not like defense and a goaltender. That makes perfect sense to me. But again, they need to thank the San Jose Sharks because the Puljujarvi is a symptom. It's like the Rangers and their development issues. You know, when you look at all the good talent the Rangers have drafted over the years, and where have they gone, and what have they done, and when they go, they're not performing to the level that you'd expect. Well, whose fault's that? If you keep drafting top end talent and they keep underperforming, you know. McDavid doesn't count before someone goes, they drafted McDavid. He was developed.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, if we do want to talk about not performing to the level that you expect, obviously 98 is, Connor Bedard's number. And look, he's been great, honestly. But, like, I think people have been expecting a miracle, realistically, like with the way that it's always this case with, a new generational talent coming in. There's this expectation that they're like, leading the league in scoring in their first year, that they're, doing a McDavid or a Crosby or whatever in their first year. And you look at what they have in the Chicago organization surrounding him. And I'm not shocked that he has 6 points in 9 games, which is off the top of my head, roughly, I think about a 60-point pace, which is still incredibly good for an 18-year-old in the NHL.
The number of comments that we're seeing of people going, "Oh, look, McDavid, look, Bedard scored, but they couldn't win." He was never going to make them win. We said that from day one.
No.
They're not good.
No.
Right? I know something about teams that aren't good, folks. They're not good. So that was never going to be a thing. So I think there's an unfair expectation on what Bedard is.
Yeah. I mean, look, let's be honest. You put him on almost any other team, and he would have probably twice as many points by now. You actually watch him play, and he's gaining the zone himself. He's carrying the puck.
He's doing everything
90% of the time, doing everything he possibly can.
And remember, they brought in pieces to sort of experience pieces to go around him and help him with that points tally, and they all got injured.
Yeah, that's true as well.
They brought in pieces around him, and then Taylor Hall goes, nah. So it's unfair expectations. Anyway, so it's episode 198, and unfortunately, we do have to start with what has been the largest news in the hockey world.
Yes.
Former Pittsburgh Penguins player Adam Johnson unfortunately passes away at the age of 29 after a on-ice accident where his neck was sliced by a skate. Now, he played 13 games for Pittsburgh between 2018 and 2020. I did like the fact that to clean the timeline and get certain images out of the timeline, people were just resharing his first goal with the Penguins, which I thought was far better. And he's playing in England for the Nottingham Panthers. It's an accident. It's a freak. And there's a lot of diatribes and people online who are trying to take pot shots and make
a lot of that unfortunately is racist, and a lot of that
there's a lot that's race baiting. I will say I unfortunately have seen the footage. I didn't go looking for it, but
I've managed to avoid watching it. I've seen it on my timeline. I didn't watch it.
What I will say is, and again, I'm going to tell everyone straight up, and I know there was a whole conversation midweek about what people should or shouldn't be allowed to watch. Don't go looking for it. You don't want to see it. Having watched it, what I will say about the accident is because people are showing freeze frames or seeing bits and pieces and going, there's a kick, he kicked him. If you actually watch, what I said happened originally is what one of the players on Johnson's team said from the bench, which was they're going at high speed. He comes around the back. He gets a hip. He goes in for a check. He gets a hip bump, and he flies out. He's not kicking. It's a hip bump at high speed, and it's a high-speed spill, and it's just a sheer freak of an accident.
Honestly, it's a miracle that this hasn't happened.
It should have happened a million times.
There's been super close calls many times. Many people that have had their faces cut. They had their things like it's just the nature of the sport. Unfortunately, that.
I said last year, Evander Kane was not far away from losing a hand. And, it was really close.
Yeah.
So the idea of wrist guards and neck guards and stuff like that gets brought up all the time. We have actually seen some movement. A bunch of the junior leagues in Canada and the US have instantly gone, yep, you need to do it. There was a really bizarre way of wording it with the NHL. I saw the Dangle podcast today, and their comment was that teams like Boston and Pittsburgh had made it optional if they wanted to wear the neck guard, to which Adam Wilde said, isn't it always optional? That's not, you haven't done anything.
I think part of the problem with that is that there is, for the NHL's purposes, there are certain equipment things that need to actually be officially okayed before someone can actually wear them. So it's possible that they weren't in that regard, that even just certain brands of equipment, certain styles of equipment stuff have to officially be okayed by the NHL and the PA.
From what I've heard, most of those brands have been okayed, just no one takes them up.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is the comfort argument or things like that. Now, when we're talking neck guards, by the way, we're not talking about heavy bits of plastic and stuff like that. We're literally talking about, if you think back to, the illustrious, Canadians captain of a couple of years ago, a turtleneck, basically.
Yeah.
It's a bit of material that goes up here, and it's basically Kevlar. And
Speaking of Thomas Mechanic, actually, he also retired recently, but we didn't have him in the.
No, we didn't have him in there. No,
but look, it's you can get pretty lightweight, like cut resistant material and stuff now, which is kind of all you need. Which is a big step up from I've seen like junior players and stuff like that here wearing like the old style kind of neck guards, which are these real kind of thick, heavy, like you're wearing like an in-flight pillow kind of thing around your neck, and it's and I can
these are all very lightweight, and it's material, and the idea is supposed to be that it's not as constricting, and it gives you enough protection. You're never going to fully be able to protect everything, but the idea is that it offers you as much protection. Like wrist guards, I think would just be a given. And the fact that players I'm not going to but I mean, look, in the league, as we know, for example, that Ryan O'Reilly is grandfathered in on the face visor, and so it doesn't have to wear a guard, which I think is stupid. But
there's not many of those players left.
I think he's the last one left.
That's quite possible. There was like
because everyone else had the option to.
No, I think Ryan Reeves still doesn't wear one.
You're Ryan Reeves.
There's a handful of tough guys that still don't wear them, but and I think Jamie Benn doesn't wear one still as well. But anyway, the point I think is that like it was always unfortunately going to require something like this to happen to really kind of put the scare into people to actually kind of go, oh, hey, maybe I should make this simple decision to protect myself. And there's this weird kind of bravado in hockey that we have these options available to us that can protect us, and we don't take them. Even at like lower levels and stuff, you kind of you see that from people, and then it's just going to take one thing to happen, and all of a sudden like, oh, maybe I should actually invest in this. We've started to see in the last few days a few NHL players for the first time wearing neck protection in games and in practices and so forth, and trying it out, seeing how that feels. We've seen a bunch of the lower level leagues kind of already starting to mandate it or setting dates for mandating it, which is going to help get that eventually to a point where it's a standard. So look, it's unfortunate that it had to get to that point to happen, unfortunately, but we are at least starting to see some change, and hopefully we can avoid that kind of thing happening again. But there is always unfortunately going to be accidents that can happen on the ice with the nature of this sport.
Like we've seen, as I said, it has happened before, not obviously fatal, unfortunately. And I've had people go, if people have seen that video, and most people who saw that video wish they hadn't seen that video. And remember, the only reason that the last sort of the Malarchik one that he survived was that he happened to have a medic who was a Vietnam field doctor, who knew how to close up those wounds, because they're literally wounds you only get in battlefields.
Yeah. And
he literally knew how to fix the wound. So, like, that's the only reason we haven't had a death from this before was sheer luck, who happened to be on the bench at the time.
What's especially tragic, I think, about it is that apparently Adam Johnson was considering retirement really soon. It's just awful timing for him, and everything that's come out about his time playing in the NHL and everyone had really glowing things to say about him as a person and a player, and it's just a really unfortunate tragedy, but hopefully some good will come from it.
Yeah, and the Romans said the Ontario Reign made him their first star of the game the other day because he played obviously.
Yeah, been a few real nice kind of tributes and stuff to him.
Exactly. No way to pivot out of that, so we won't even try. We'll just move into the next thing we're going to talk about. And Senators fans, unfortunately, this is going to be a rough, bumpy couple of topics for you. So we asked on the last podcast when we were talking about players that haven't been re-signed, and we were like, Shane Pinto still hasn't been re-signed. Shane Pinto has been suspended for 41 games for activities related to sports wagering.
And this came out like pretty much right after we last recorded.
The day after.
That seems to be the habit recently, is we'll record something and then within like 12 hours there'll be the answer to the question.
Like, where's that contract?
Yeah.
It's happened a few times. It's happened a few times, actually. It happened with Anaheim when we were talking about, well, where are their contracts? The next morning they signed them all.
Yeah.
So this is a really interesting and confusing one.
It's weird.
There's no evidence that he bet on the NHL.
No, I mean, they've more or less said straight out that it wasn't related to betting on. Well, technically, they've said that it isn't related to betting on NHL games. They haven't specified, from what I understand, that it couldn't have involved prop bets on NHL players, but I don't think it sounds like it's
I would
not
think
that specific,
even
and
for
you
the
would think it would be more
NHL,
games if that was the case.
Even for the NHL, that's too much legalese, jumping over hoops to sort of.
No, and a lot of people would mention, like, if it was involved with like betting on and anything,
he would have been gone.
He would have been essentially gone, or the suspension would have been way longer, that it would have effectively ended his career. So it seems unlikely in that regard, but it is a weird irony because we do see literally the Senators with betting advertising on their helmets. The NHL is leaning more and more into advertising sports betting and listing the odds in broadcasts and talking about all of that kind of stuff. It's a weird parallel to all of a sudden.
Apparently, there's been a change in the legislation in Canada, however, regarding media. So, which, again, to give an obvious example that some people who watch this might have noticed, but the Dangle podcast is no longer every 2.5 seconds followed by ads for Sports Interaction.
Yeah.
Because they basically got you can't do that notice on third-party broadcasting. And apparently the laws in Canada on sports betting and sports betting advertising have changed significantly. So that's going to be really interesting. Again, all of these NHL teams, when they allowed for the advertising, most of them gravitated towards some sports book. Because that's where the money tends to be. I also think the other reason why that might change, though, is, remember, Bally Sports in the US, which is basically a betting company that happened to run TV, fell over. And that's why a bunch of teams won't get in their games in markets, and a bunch of MLB teams still don't have coverage of their games because Bally Sports fell over. So I think there's they want to get away from a little bit of this because of that, but also they're a bit worried about the fact that the money just might not actually exist after a little bit. But the Pinto thing is weird because there's no suggestion that he bet on games. There's no suggestion that they didn't even really say anything about improper practice.
From the perspective of like the contract, from the CBA perspective, apparently you're just not allowed to bet on NHL games. It doesn't specifically say anything about not being able to bet in general. So, which is the real confusing thing, and the real kind of unknown, like unanswered question is like, what exactly was the nature of what happened? There was a lot of speculation.
Is he betting on the Real Housewives? Is that it?
I mean, like, it sounds like he bet on other sports, but it also doesn't sound like that's technically against
illegal.
The rules. But there must have been something that was considered improper because there's been talk about like, there was multiple different IP addresses connecting to his account and always kind of saying he has this account and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, what's the actual line? But from what we can tell, this actual result, this 41-game suspension, was the result of a negotiation between him and the league. So clearly he has admitted some wrongdoing in some regards, and this is the compromise that they've come to. So there's probably, as part of that agreement, an understanding to not release the specifics of exactly what happened.
The other weird part about this, as we talked about on the last podcast, Ottawa can't afford to re-sign him anyway. Like they don't
have any money.
So, like, this feels convenient, and I'm not saying that I'm not being a conspiracy theorist and going, they did this deliberately. No, this feels really convenient for like a lot of parties here because he's sitting out, but he's not holding out.
Technically, they could have just left him unsigned for the whole year anyway. They own his RFA rights regardless.
Yeah, but I think this is the thing as well. I think
this is going
to help them try to drive his price down.
For sure, yeah.
And it's just really, the timing is bizarre, and it ended up being part one of what ended up being a second part. This was the shot. The chaser happened yesterday. So the Ottawa Senators will find a first-round pick for their handling of the Evgeny Dadonov trade to Vegas in July 2021. This is, if you remember, that trade itself was perfectly fine. The issue became Vegas went to move him, having not been told there was a no trade clause.
Yeah,
And so when
essentially,
they went to move him, they couldn't. And basically what they've been dinged for is deceptive practice.
yeah. So Vegas had a deal with Anaheim to move him as part of some cap situation stuff, and it ended up being vetoed because he did have a no trade clause, which apparently those teams and the details around that weren't passed on by the Ottawa Senators to Vegas at the time a year earlier when they'd made that trade. So Vegas apparently weren't aware of that, which is weird because, Cap Friendly and stuff's aware of that. So it'd be strange that, all of a sudden they just didn't know.
Especially since the guy who set up and created, the one before it, General Fanager, works for Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's an official process and there was supposed to be a handover of this information. There ended up being a really long, I think something like 72-page report that was handed over to the Senators in regards to this. The big question is why this took 18 months to work out. It sounds like the NHL was kind of just going to let it slide until Vegas and Anaheim complained about it.
So here's the thing. There's been a lot of this, and a lot of people in the group and the Australian NHL fans page were going off the deep end about, well, this wouldn't have happened unless Vegas threw a tantrum. I disagree with that, and everyone knows I hate Vegas. Everyone knows I don't like them. But Vegas not only have every right to throw a tantrum, I think Vegas have every right to feel aggrieved that the pick doesn't go to them. And if I was Vegas, I would have been absolutely demanding that pick, because the fact is they traded for him. They then couldn't move him near a deadline where they were trying to, and that was the year they just missed the playoffs, only just.
Yeah.
And they thought they had the trade worked out to give them some cap space to make some other moves. That didn't happen. And if you remember, it sunk Vegas's deadline completely.
Yeah, it messed up their ability to practice, basically. And it also reflected badly on them from a public PR perspective.
Now, apparently, from what some of the insiders were saying, that basically Andlauer went into Pierre Dorion and said, this is a fireable offense. And Dorion was like, yeah, I mean, I agree. And Dorion was fired as general manager. And here's the other thing. I think a couple of things can be true. I think he's done decently well since they've changed, they've obviously lost Eugene Melnyk, and he's done decently well with what he's had. By the same token, he deserved to get fired for this. Absolutely deserved to get fired for this.
Yeah, and it is effectively malpractice. So.
Andlauer talked about it at the press conference where he said Dadonov was traded to Vegas, a no-trade list was not provided, and Anaheim was on the no-trade list. So Andlauer lays it out perfectly. He found out now. He didn't find out about this before, because this is the next bit we'll get to. But basically, he found out now that they did not hand over. Now, the general manager did not hand over the information to the other club at the time of the trade, going, by the way, there's a no trade on this. And as a result, the trade went through. Vegas felt they had the ability to make moves. They did not have the ability to make moves. And Dadonov had every right to sit still and go, no, I'm not going, which is what he did. So Steve Staios takes over as interim general manager, which gives Steve Dangle a win, because he predicted that in the offseason that's what he'd heard. We said the other week, we talked about Staios, and it was like, it feels like Andlauer long-term brought Staios in.
I mean, he wants to put his own stamp on it. He's taken over. The unspoken thing here is that all of this situation happened under the Eugene Melnyk ownership. And just recently, Andlauer has taken over ownership of the team, very recently. And apparently wasn't made aware of any of this ongoing situation, any of it. And it sounds like wasn't made aware of the Pinto stuff until recently either, during the point of time when they were negotiating for the sale of the team, which sounds
all
like
of this stuff
to me.
All of this stuff feels like something that should be part of, in a normal business, you have discovery when you go to do the handover of the books. And in discovery, the books are handed to you everything, warts and all, so you know exactly what is there. With sports franchises, part of that discovery process should involve, do we have any ongoing issues or hanging over the team?
Are there any open investigations into this team?
Are there any investigations which could impact the on-ice product, which could impact our ability to raise revenue with this lineup? Is there anything that could impact players that we control the contracts for? That should be part of a discovery process when you take over a team. You don't want to take over a team and then find out, oh, by the way, we've got like this investigation on this player and we're about to drop the hammer on them, but you can't know that yet.
Yeah, and it's especially harsh like that. This gets dumped on him thinking, he's bought this asset with this certain value. And, like it or not, a first round pick has a certain financial value to a team, to, its long-term impact and its long-term ability to compete.
And it's a significant value.
I mean, Andlauer is well within its rights to sue the NHL for not disclosing this information.
And this is the thing too. I think there are lots of people here who are well within. Andlauer is within his rights to try to sue the NHL for revenues lost. Vegas are well within their rights to take people to task over. There were a lot of people going, oh, they just want people to know it wasn't their fault on the trade. If I'm Vegas, I would have been like that pick goes. The pick should go to Vegas. That's what I would be saying straight up. Anaheim go, well, we thought we had a player. Turns out we didn't. It's just ridiculous now.
And also that it took this long. I do not understand how it could possibly take the NHL 18 months to investigate this and find out that, essentially what can be explained in a one sentence thing.
So the line of the press conference was where he turned around and went, why I inherited this is beyond me. There is no reason for it to last this long. And he's right. It should have been dealt with under the previous regime.
Yeah.
Dorian should have been out the door prior to that. The thing is, the NHL, I'm a bit amazed that the NHL didn't bring down supplementary punishment on Dorian. They punished the team. I'm amazed they didn't bring down a supplementary punishment on him specifically because he's the general manager who made the trade. He's the general manager who did not hand over the no trade. It's him. So surely there should have been a supplementary punishment on him. And maybe the only reason that didn't happen was that Andlauer basically said to the league, we're not going to worry about that situation. I've got that handled. But I'm interested to see as well, do we think this is going to impact his ability to get himself hired?
Dorian? Yeah. I imagine that he's not going to get he's not going to find himself with another team in the next few years, and he's probably going to have to work his way back up through.
I think everyone expected that when he got fired, and I think everyone expected probably this year he would get fired.
Yeah.
That he would probably then fall into another job. Yeah. And I think this has probably stopped that.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that he's a candidate for any GM jobs in the near future with that kind of,
Why did you leave your last position? Deceptive practices.
Yeah.
Now a couple more things. The other thing I want to bring up, two things about this. So one was the other quote from the press conference, which was fascinating, which was the organization should have been made aware about the Shane Pinto situation. I don't understand why Dadonov took so long. Maybe it was because the club was for sale and they didn't want to disrupt, making sure the seller got the best price possible. That feels accurate.
Yeah.
That they wanted to hold that up. So I think that's an interesting idea. And if that comes to light, I think that Gary has some answering to do.
Yeah, I mean, even if I could understand,
the league just went, we're not going to talk on it. Literally, that's in the statement.
The only thing I can think of is that, maybe they were just about ready to, finish this investigation. They'd started, maybe they started this investigation in the off season or whatever, and then all of a sudden, Melnick dies in March 2022. Maybe there was a period there where they went, oh well, we don't want to. There's no owner currently that, apart from the kind of passed on a group that were managing it or whatever to deal with this situation. It can wait until there's a new owner or whatever before this situation gets resolved. But even if that was the case, if they knew about this a year ago, more than a year ago, that this was the result of the investigation or whatever, like not disclosing that to a potential buyer is, just as deceptive practice as not disclosing that no trade clause.
I feel like the league is doing everything in its power to avoid actually answering questions. Like, again, the fact that they put out a statement and finish with the league will issue no further statements on this matter, and it's like, you don't get to say that. You don't get to go and we can.
No more questions.
Nobody can ask us about this process. You cannot, under any circumstances, ask us about this process. I mean, the other big problem then, I think, for the NHL, and I think it's a big problem going forward, is there are people who are looking to buy clubs. Andlauer, one of the reasons that Andlauer's bid was successful is he's been in the market for a team on his own for a while. Part owned Colorado, part owned, so he was a part owner in a couple of places. Andlauer was next. Now, there are a couple of other people who are sitting there with money trying to buy NHL clubs. That next negotiation feels like it's going to be really awkward.
Yeah. Are you sure? Are you really sure there's nothing you need to tell me about this club? Am I going to find out in 6 months' time?
And there's a video somewhere. If I can find the energy and the motivation to do it, there is a video that I would like to do on basically the long and checkered history of the NHL selling teams, because it's, again, the most obvious and famous example is in the documentary Big Shot around the sale of the Islanders to somebody who had no money. And Gary was there. Gary was involved. This was Gary. It's not like he gets to go, well, that was – he's in the documentary. Like, Gary Bettman sits there talking about John Spanos and goes, oh, he was very believable. And it's like, you're the head of the NHL. Like, seriously, you apparently vet these people yourself. How are you sitting there going, oh, John Spanos was very believable?
I was convinced.
And how are you still the head of the league all these years later and holding back information on a club that you're selling? Like, it just feels like hockey will be a great sport when it's done. It'll be when it's finished, it'll be such a good sport. So moving on from that, the Washington Capitals have also announced that Nicholas Backstrom is stepping away for an unspecified period while dealing with the effects of his hip surgery.
I mean, this was always a potential when he had this surgery. Like the potential outcomes weren't good, didn't look good when he had it. It was one of those things that who was the other one that had it? Who never came back? I'm trying to think of a couple of years back. Was a West Coast player who just had the surgery, tried, but could just never get up to speed again. Could never, like the previous examples of this weren't good, and it was a little surprising that Backstrom was able to actually return and play. Although, realistically, he's never been the player that he once was after this surgery. So I can fully understand him wanting to take a step away from it. It is specifically unfortunate for the club in the regards that, they gave him that, paid for your past efforts, extension shortly after they won the cup, and then not long after that is like, oh, actually I need this double hip surgery and I'll probably there's a good chance I will never play again. And I think the unfortunate thing is I would not be at all shocked if Nicholas Backstrom never comes back to the NHL.
Well, the last line of his statement is the most telling one. The last line of the statement was, I asked for privacy at this time as I determine my next steps and viable options moving forward. That doesn't sound promising. And the other thing was, I'm looking at an article on NBC Sports, and the only other player who attempted to come back from the resurfacing surgery was Ed Jovdanovsky years ago, who only played 37 more games. So this surgery has a really poor track record of being able to actually come back and play. Carl Hagelin's had it as well.
Yeah. Haglin
and-
also recently retired for the
Yeah.
same reason.
It's also the surgery that Patrick Kane has had.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm feeling fit and fine, and I'll be good to come back. But I'll be interested to see how long that lasts, because as they said, like the only other player who's ever successfully got back on the ice was Ed Jonovsky, and he only played 37 games, and then it packed it in, and he was done. So it doesn't sound promising.
No.
Now we'll move on. We'll talk a bit about the league in general and into the last story, which involves my name for those watching. For those not watching, it's Jumbo for the Hockey Hall of Fame 2025. And we'll talk about Jumbo in a minute, because I think we want to do a quick whip around the league and anything that might have popped out. Now, there was obviously no games today, and nobody played.
Didn't play.
Nobody played. The Sharks certainly played no hockey. We will start in San Jose. In one game, Vancouver managed to score more goals than San Jose has scored in the whole season.
Yeah.
Vancouver scored 10. We have scored 9 for the whole year.
Well, you got one today. Does that bring it up to 10 or is that 9?
That's 9.
Oh my God.
We are bad. Look, here's the thing. The San Jose Sharks, as we said at the start of the year, when all these people were going, Anaheim are going to be bad, I'm like, no team is going to be San Jose. No team. That blue line might be the worst blue line ever iced in hockey. Like, it could well be the worst blue line. Mackenzie Blackwood, by the way, in goal, has been absolutely amazing. He has been unbelievable in goal. And they get thumped. Like, Kakinen was in today. He got cleaned up, and no Sharks player checked on him. The opposition came over and made sure he was okay. No Shark was there.
That's tough.
The problem is the Sharks are some rookies, a bunch of veterans, and a bunch of players that can't play anywhere else. And they're doing things like, for example, this is the year that Eklund has to be up. You can't really send him back down to the juniors again this year. So William Eklund is staying, and he's not playing brilliantly, but I don't think that's a long-term problem. You'd want him to be performing a bit better, but I don't think that's a long-term problem. Bordelow's been sent back down, which tells you all you need to know about what San Jose is doing this year. Like Bordelow was great in the first couple of games. Very competitive, very good. The line with him and Eklund in particular was really good. But they sent Bordelow back down because they're like, we don't want you near this car crash right now. Couple of things I'm worried about. That's we are trying to be the worst team in the league. Everyone knows it. That's a performance that gets David Quinn fired long before he's supposed to be fired. He is supposed to be the sacrificial lamb this season. The point is, you are supposed to fire David Quinn as you get to the end of the year. And I think a lot of Sharks fans, myself included, suspect that Ryan Masovsky, who's one of the assistants who they got in from Chicago, has been on the bench for 2 years to get some NHL experience under his belt before he takes over the team. And I suspect that's where they're going to go eventually. But I don't think they want to do it now. And the problem is, if you lose 10-1 and the building is almost empty, Hasso Plattner is not going to let that stand for too long.
You at least want to be like, this thing is, it's okay to be terrible so long as you're at least entertaining, so long as like at least there are people that.
And early on they were, and
yeah,
the last couple of games, what I'm really disappointed in is the veteran and experienced players that roster has did not try, and I would be absolute. Thomas Hurdle came out and said, that's the worst game of hockey I've ever played, and it's the worst. I'd hope it's the worst game of hockey ever. I hope you've never played in a worse one. Thomas Hurdle was embarrassing. You've got players like Hoffman on that team. You've got Duclair on that team. Like, they go, oh, Logan Couture's out injured. That doesn't matter. What was he going to do? Make it 8, not 10?
Yeah.
Like, this is a bad team that doesn't play for that coach, and the veterans have all decided they know what this season is.
Yeah.
The veterans know that Sharks aren't trying to win.
Yeah.
And the
What's the
rookies
point?
aren't
What's the point?
And the veterans know they're not trying to win, and the rookies aren't good enough yet to get them there. So what you get instead is that. And if David Quinn can't make it at least look like they're trying, that was his 300th game, by the way, in the NHL today as a coach. And before the game, they said, how has it been for you? And he goes, well, obviously, I'd like to have won a lot more. And I'm like, that's not what any coach should say as they hit their 300th game in hockey. I wish I'd won more games.
I mean, to some degree, that's not totally within his control, depending on the teams that you end up on. But
to be fair, what team did he start with? A hot to trot Rangers team that he drove into the ground.
That is true.
So, David, look, I was very much not a fan of the Quinn hiring at the time. And the tank is certainly going well. We have not won a game. We are 0-9 in fun, without the fun. And it's just going to get worse. It's just going to get worse. And I think the biggest problem that San Jose now face is that, as I said, they don't want to fire Quinn too early because you don't want to put Wasowski in for this and then have him get tarnished by this.
Yeah.
But you can't have that happen. If that keeps happening, and if the building is empty, and that's the bigger point, if they can't get people back in the Shark Tank,
what choice do you have?
Hasso-Plattner has threatened to move the team because he didn't quite like the TV deal he got. I mean, if the building's empty, that's a problem. So I'm worried about the next few weeks. I'm not worried about the season. I don't think we're going to magically start winning games, and I'm not worried about it losing games because, that's kind of the point. But you want to pretend you're doing something.
Well, look, if there's a team right now that can make a bad team look good through their ineptitude, it might be the Penguins, which you're playing next.
Let's talk about that.
So we'll see. I mean, look, I would not at all be shocked if for some reason they went in and the Sharks got their first win of the season against the Penguins, as awful as they are.
What the hell is going on in Pittsburgh?
I don't know. It's all. I'm on one hand, they're not this bad. But things have not really kind of gelled. Things have not really worked at the start of the season. Carlson hasn't fully gotten going yet, obviously. There's been a whole bunch of changeover. They more or less replaced most of the bottom six. And the replacements so far haven't really been a huge step up. The fourth line is still awful because it still has an expensive Jeff Carter on it who has totally forgotten how to play again.
Yeah.
So, that doesn't help, but he was scratched in the most recent practice. Hopefully, as we've been shouting for over a year now, to healthy scratch him, that seems like it may finally be happening. Look, I don't think that it's unfixable, but there's just been nothing has really kind of gone right for them as much as they've had a bunch of great performances from a bunch of their top six, which has generally been fine, or at least passable in most games. It's all just kind of fallen apart at times. They'll be, winning a game and then just not turn up for one period, and then all of a sudden they lose the Blackhawks.
I was going to say, how do you pump the Avalanche 4-0?
Yeah.
And then your next two games are a loss to the Senators and the Ducks.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. On any particular night, they could beat any team in the league, but then they'll just turn up to the next game and just not have it. And it's to me, honestly, at this point in time, I've kind of had this sinking feeling for the last couple of years that as much as there's no better coach available out there, they might just need to fire Mike Sullivan and get a new coach, or something, or at least unless he's going to come and one day and just totally change the system. It's just gotten stale. It's just not working for them anymore, and it hasn't in a year or two. And we're just kind of pretending that it's going to get better when nothing is really changing.
it's weird.
Yeah, I mean the time is growing short for them to be able to like turn this around and actually like still make a decent run of the playoffs. There's a bunch of like paper tigers in front of them that they could easily still pass the Flyers, the Caps, and the Blue Jackets, but it's got to start getting turned around in the next 10 games, or they're going to be in a pretty big hole realistically. I don't know. Things just haven't fallen together. They haven't got good goaltending. They haven't gotten a consistent performance from the team, and it's all fixable. But whether or not it happens, or whether or not they just piss it away again, is the question.
The thing is, I mean, if you're going to make as we know with coaching, if you're going to make that move coaching wise,
yeah,
you got to have someone to bring in. What you're gonna go and make the move for like a Vigneault or a.
Well, that's the thing. Like, there's no like I think
Vigneault, Eakins, Sutter. I mean,
yeah. Well, this is the thing. Like Sullivan is one of the best coaches in the NHL, regardless. It's just that his system is just not working anymore for them. They just don't have the same results as they did a few years ago playing that same system. The NHL has moved on, and he's kind of gotten stuck behind. He needs to either fix that, or get moved on.
Boudreau to be brought in. Bruce, there it is. I think in terms of other teams, first of all, we did say it would happen, but the Flyers have turned back into pumpkins. So, for all those people who got very excited by where that they were.
Yeah, after like 5 games.
Oops. The Bruins are still winning. I've lost all idea now. I don't understand. I don't know how. I don't know how to do this.
Are they just going to do this shit again, where they like win the President's Trophy and then go out in the first round again? Yep. Like, is that just what?
There's no way they're built. There's no way they're built to do anything more. Also, the Rangers are sneaky, really good in the Metro at the moment. Like very quietly, the Rangers are just going about their business and being good. The Red Wings,
honestly, one of the few like actual like solid teams right now in the Metro. Like the New Jersey and the Rangers are probably really the only 2 teams that are just like consistently good in the Metro.
In the Pacific, obviously, Vegas is a mile clear of everybody in that division. They're so far. They're already on 21 points. Like they're running away. Like the Canucks are second at the moment, helped out by a really good goal differential from today.
Obviously though, like I think that they've performed better than people expected them to. Whether or not this lasts long term is the other question. But they've had some very good variants and very good performances from Pedersen and Hughes. Whether or not that can last, like there is some unsustainable numbers in that, but whether or not that returns back to a point where they're still winning games, even when they're not getting 5 points a night, is another question. But
the other couple I want to mention just quickly is first of all Arizona, who are pretty good,
pretty solid. Yeah, honestly,
they're playing well.
I'm impressed.
They're doing pretty well. The other team that one other I want to mention on a negative note is the Minnesota Wild, who are not particularly great. They've lost 4 in a row. The only teams that have lost more in a row at the moment are the Flames and the Sharks. Like
Flames also not great right now.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, look, it's not going very well for Alberta. Right, the season at the moment is really bad. Like the outdoor classic, the Heritage Classic the other day. It was like the Oilers won that game because somebody needed to.
Yeah, someone had to win.
I'm just quietly, is something wrong with Connor McDavid?
Well, I mean, he's probably still injured. He was supposed to be out for a week or 2. He came back after like 6 days to play in the Heritage Classic, who absolutely was not fully healthy. And probably still isn't, but he hasn't had like the expectation of a Connor McDavid year so far as well. So maybe that he's been playing through something for a while, and who knows? I'm curious to see how that turns out, because obviously the thing we know about the Oilers is that they go as far as McDavid and Draisaitl can take them. And as good as they've been, they haven't been their insane, top of the league selves so far. And this is the result, 9 games, 2-6-1.
Yeah, they just lack depth across the board.
Yeah.
They lack depth.
And they always have.
And like the answer that Edmonton came up with obviously was to go out and re-sign Sam Gagner for a feel-good story. And look, he scored 2 goals today. Congratulations to him. But he scored 2 goals by the time they were already 4-1 down.
Yeah.
And like they weren't going to come back and win that game, regardless of the fact he scored 2 goals. Like, they were not coming back to win that game. And there's not much that Sam Gagner can do about them being in like a 3-goal hole. Like, there's just the way they're recruiting on a budget that's like shoestring makes no sense. I don't understand it. So to finish us off, Jumbo Joe Thornton took to his Instagram, took to Twitter, took to everything to say, in his own inimitable way, I thought you would have figured it out by now, but I'm retired, which is the most Jumbo way to do it. It's like I got asked today, was I upset that the Sharks didn't bring him back for a 1-day contract to retire a Shark? And I'm like, no, because Jumbo didn't want that. That's not what he wants to do. And I know that he didn't retire on a Sharks contract, but he retires Shark. There's no doubt about that. And,
for sure.
And he's going to be in that organization going forward. There's absolutely no doubt they're going to have him in that organization. They've already got Patrick Marleau working for them. Jumbo, I think, will probably enjoy this year on the farm. And then next year they'll find a role and bring him into the organization under some other key role. But obviously he's 44, which he's looked 44 for the last 7 years.
Yeah, sure.
He aged overnight.
Yeah. He got old real quick. The beard doesn't help. It went grey real quick.
I was trying to find, I can't work out where I've put it. I've still got that photo of him on the tractor signing the contract framed somewhere.
He's looked like a fucking wizard for like 10 years now. So
So obviously, 24 seasons overall, Boston Bruins, San Jose Sharks, Toronto Maple Leafs, and Florida Panthers, for those who forgot about the last one.
I kind of did, to be honest. He wasn't super visible there.
And Davos. Don't forget his stints over in the Swiss League. He loves the Swiss League. He's a big fan of the Swiss League. But 430 goals, 1,109 assists in 1,714 games. Obviously, the last part of the stats, he was on Team Canada on 6 occasions, won the 2010 Gold, 2004, 2016 World Cup, the 97 World Juniors. For me, that's my Sharks captain. When I think captain of the San Jose Sharks, I think Joe Thornton. When I think San Jose Sharks, I think Joe Thornton. He is, and I love Patrick Marleau dearly, but Joe Thornton is the best player to ever play for the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah. And honestly, like, really should be in the Hall of Fame very soon.
Yeah, well, he's eligible in 2025, and if he doesn't go in 2025, it's a travesty. But then again, remember, the NHL left him off the list of the top 100 players of all time when he was, 6th in assists. He's 6th in assists. Mm-hmm. And he's a very long way clear of people who are still playing, with one exception. Obviously, Yager, we know, has never officially retired. So technically...
Yager, I think, is going to be an interesting one. I really do hope that he does get that 1-day contract thing with the Penguins. And I think that they've paved the way, because there was a period of time when there was a rift between Yager and the Penguins, and they've just recently, like in this last off season, kind of brought him into the organization. He had a little bit of a tour of and I was kind of expecting that, like, they were gonna set something up this year for him to retire, but he's still playing. So
still playing. Like, when you go and look at the list, he's still active.
Yeah.
So That's
So,
why.
but I do think that they've set the groundwork for that, and I really do hope that there's a big ceremony for Yaga.
The one thing I will say is that I think that Kyle Dubas is very good at that, having seen what him and Shanahan did with beliefs and fixing a lot of issues that existed there in terms of, Dave Keon not being in the organization and returning him to a fold that there was no hope Dave Keon was going anywhere near Toronto again. And they got him back in the building and they got him back to the rink and they got him up in the Hall of Fame on the rafters and stuff like that. So I feel like if anyone's going to do that in Pittsburgh, it's going to be Dubas can do that. But on Thornton, look, it's most of the biggest moments in San Jose Sharks history involve Joe Thornton.
Yeah.
The trade for Joe Thornton was seismic. The fact that Boston were willing to do that was stupid.
Yes.
And if you know anything about Boston, especially at that time, and you've seen how a lot of that the internal workings of the Bruins worked, they made some very weird trades.
It's insane to me how successful Boston have been, considering the horrible, horrible trades that they've made over the years. Like there's
he won a Hart Trophy.
Yeah, there's 4 or 5 all-time awful trades that they love. People that they've traded away, like they traded away Sagan, they traded away Phil Kessel, they traded away, Thornton. They made that trade for those 3 first-round picks that they fucked up every single one of them, and they could have had Barzal and Kyle Connor and all that kind of shit. Like the mistakes that the Boston organization have made and how successful they have been despite it is insane.
I mean, the fact that the other thing you've got to remember when they traded him was they didn't just trade Joe Thornton, Hart Trophy winner and highest scorer on their team. They traded Joe Thornton, Hart Trophy winner, highest scorer on their team, and captain of the Boston Bruins.
Yeah.
Like, to a franchise that had sucked. Absolutely sucked. And I mean, for me, the first thing that you really get noticed with Joe Thornton is that pairing with Chichu. And like, again, how good of an assist man is Joe Thornton? He made Jonathan Chichu's scoring numbers something which would be elite. Like, Devin Setaguchi has elite numbers when on the ice with Joe Thornton. Like, the man can pick out a pass like nobody's business. The man has the ability to read a game.
Yeah, one of the greatest passes of all time.
In ways that, and I've watched him lay passes and you go, how the hell did you spot that? And like, we nearly got the rooster. We nearly got the rooster. Like 3 goals. He was so close to the 4th. I'm kind of glad he didn't. He would have done it. But and just like when they talked about when the Sharks were good and the culture was right, that was Thornton and Marlowe. Like, that culture that was set, that way to do things in San Jose that existed for so long was Joe Thornton and Patrick Marlowe. And you walked in the door of the dressing room, and then Brent Burns became part of that too, and then a couple of others. But you walked, and Pavelski. And you walked in the door, and there was Marlowe, Thornton, Pavelski, Burns. You didn't ask who ran the dressing room. It was them. And they told you what you did and how to do it. And they very much had a no arseholes policy in that locker room. And, that was where, when the Kane stuff happened, for example, with San Jose, that was one of the big issues. And one of the things I think that also meant that, Jumbo started looking, apart from the, I want to win a cup somewhere else, I want to win a cup. I think that was part of the reason too, that culture started to shift a little bit. And they just sort of went, not here for this. But everyone's been like, okay, well, we know that they're going to put his jersey up in the rafters in San Jose. Like, Marlowe's went up. Jumbo's will go up too. Jumbo will be in the organization. And obviously, the other big highlight for me, obviously, is that cup run. And he was an integral part of getting us to that final. Like, he wasn't the captain for that run. That was Pavelski. And by that point, people were like, oh, is he starting to fade a little bit? He was really good in that run. He was good in that season. That season, he had a bounce back year that season, and I think he scored 82 and 82. I think he had his points tally was high. He had 82 and 82 when he was a plus 25. And like 63 assists and 19 goals, which for him is really good. So he still had impact towards the end as well. And it's, for me, the thing that's the sad part for me always with San Jose is that they didn't get Thornton and Marlowe the cup.
Yeah.
And
that's the real downside.
When you look at players who have missing rings, I think Thornton and Marlowe are two of the big standouts of a missing ring, and Joe Thornton should have a Stanley Cup, and the fact that he doesn't, like, he did everything in his power to get them there. He single-handedly beat the Kings in 2011, 2012, and then nearly dragged them past Vancouver to get to the final. Just fell short.
It will be a crime if that's what keeps him out of the Hockey Hall of Fame anytime soon. Like, I know that he absolutely will get in eventually, but if he isn't an immediate in because of that's garbage.
I don't think you can keep Joe Thornton out of the Hall of Fame on the he didn't win a cup. I just don't think you can do it. I think his scoring numbers, his assist numbers, and again, I think the other problem that people have with the assist numbers is they're not taking into account that Thornton's assist numbers are not dead park. Like, he's not assisting in the years, although he is the last active player to have played against Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah.
So in him retiring, there are now no more active players who played against Gretzky. But in terms of like his assist numbers, we're not dealing with the Gretzky years. We're not dealing with all of those years where scoring was stupid and Wayne Gretzky would go out and outscore the whole league by himself. He got these assists in a more modern league, and he was still putting up numbers. So the number of assists, that 1,109 assists over that span of time, really, like, again, he's sixth on the list. But if you look at who's ahead of him, it's Gretzky, Francis, Messier, Bork, Yager, Coffey.
Yeah.
One of these things is not like the others.
Yeah.
And then behind him is Oates, Yzerman, Howe, Dion, Lemieux, and then Sakic. Like, he is an absolute outlier of all of those other players. Like, he's an absolute outlier. So, obviously, I tip my cap, obviously, to the wonderful Joe Thornton and everything he's meant to the Sharks organization, and everything he will mean to the Sharks organization going forward after what is going to be a really painful season. They're going to need a lot of Jumbo being positive around the place.
It'll be nice to have him around cheering people up, that's for sure.
They'll want. If there's one game they win this year, they'll want to win the game where they put 19 in the rafters.
Oh, God, I hope so.
There is a reason why in all hockey games I play as 19. That's the reason. I play as 19 because of Joe Thornton. Simple. And that's going to do us for this week. Now, don't know when we'll be back. We will be back. Brendon's obviously got a busy schedule coming up. We'll try to sneak something in. I may have a special going forward as well, so I will let everyone know what's going on with then. But we will catch you all later.
See ya.